Hey fellas, before I start the video, I'd just like to quickly state that I'm not advocating for nor encouraging the doxing, targeting, harassment, bullying of any of the individuals that may be mentioned or featured in this particular video. Remember, this is an opinion piece of my particular commentary on the subject matter, however controversial as it may be. So, with that all stated, let's go ahead and start the show. Saudi bents Russia. Has fuck all to do with the story that we're going to be discussing here today. I just felt like saying it. So hey, what's going on everybody? Tujo Panda back in action, top out something else today, but something else, yet again, it's more furry drama. Oh boy, my favorite! Except, this pertains to a particular convention taking place in the Midwest. You might have heard of it. It's called DenFur, taking place in Denver, Colorado. Very creative name, very auspicious name. You know, kudos to how catchy it is, really rolls off the tongue. DenFur. But yeah, if you're wondering why I'm mentioning DenFur, this whole video is pretty much about conventions, you know, and I guess before I get too far ahead of myself, I'd like to ask you all one little thing. Have you ever had the esteemed pleasure, the opportunity to attend a furry convention? And if you have, like, did you like it? Did you not like it? Was it a meh experience? Was it a good experience? I'm interested in hearing you on that. But as a con attendee, I would imagine that you'd be kind of concerned about the actual operations. Because historically, like, I've attended several cons over the years, I've never had to really think about the actual operations of the convention. Now, out of curiosity, I would be curious as to how did the convention get the funds necessary to run the event? Like, what relationship do they have with the convention hotel or the convention space at large? And how did the people maintain a cool, level head when they were, you know, basically trying to operate this con? There are certainly questions that come about after you've attended a couple of them over the years. But for the most part, I came to the furry fandom like a virtual no-name. Fur meets were no longer satisfactory to me. I needed something a little bit more. And it exposed me to hundreds upon thousands of people out there, many of whom I still call friend to this day, even though we've drifted apart a bit ever since I got involved in VR chat. It's unfortunate, but life gets in the way, especially with this ongoing pandemic. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. So, it was just the other day, last week, on a Thursday, I believe. I just decided to take a couple minutes to myself, take a little break, scroll through furry Twitter, see what was going on, what the haps were. I wanted to get a sense of the goings-ons in the World Wide Web around me, alright? And I couldn't help but notice there was a little bit of a disturbance in the force. A little bit of a back and forth, a little bit of an argument, a little bit of an argy-bargy, as you'd say. Various people were fucking up in arms about DenFur, alright? They were angry, pissed off, concerned, and they were honestly playing the glorified version of the blame game. Everybody was pointing the finger at each other, and it was kind of surprising because this wasn't something that any other YouTuber had been talking about up to that point. I mentioned DenFur like a while ago on a prior video several months ago, not because the convention itself was necessarily problematic or anything like that, but it was more because various individuals that were considering attending were, you know, lightly encouraging people to fake their vaccination cards in order to gain entry. And while they weren't explicitly saying, like, go ahead and do that, they were suggesting that, hey, it's easy enough to just print them out and make up whatever bullshit you want to put on that card. It can look any way you want. And, you know, predictably, furry Twitter responded in the way that you would probably imagine it would. Outright condemnation, outcry, and antipathy directed at this individual. I wasn't expecting that we'd be talking about it so soon, but this is less about, you know, that and more about the actual operations of the convention. Alright, so I'm not going to bullshit you. I just want to say right here for transparency's sake that I've never been to DenFur. I've had several friends that have gone, and I have a couple of friends that had allegedly close ties or association with the con staff, because that's kind of important to bear in mind here. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to pick sides here. I will say that this is not a story of heroes and villains. This is more of a shit show. You know, everyone's pointing the fingers, slaying shit at each other. So, like, don't think for a second that I'm going to point out to people that it's like, oh yeah, they're absolutely right, or oh yeah, they're absolutely wrong. I'm trying not to pick sides here. I'm Sweden. I'm Switzerland right now, alright? Like, I'm trying to be as impartial and just looking at everything that I've been able to sort of pour over in the form of tweets, attachments, and documents that, you know, would sort of allege that some wrongdoing has occurred. But, like, for transparency's sake, you know, like, there are a lot of layers to unpack here. I am not trying to drag this video out. I'm not trying to bullshit you. But, like, this is going to be very hard to follow. A lot of people involved, a lot of layers to unpack and unravel, and a lot of sort of circumstances that have arisen that kind of impact the overall presentation here. This is not a black and white story that I can easily unpack and present to you like in a neat little bundle. This is kind of going to be a story, not so much black and white, but in shades of gray. Okay? So, what happened? Alright. An email was circulating all across Twitter, like more specifically a screen cap of an email that somebody had received in reference to DenFur. More specifically, Corgi Events LLC, which is the company that operates DenFur and various other conventions, but we're not quite there yet. Basically, they were informing artists and dealers, hey, listen, the con chair is actually planning on embezzling all of the money and declaring bankruptcy, shutting down the convention, and running away. Like, just taking all the money, like, smash grab, run like hell, and leave. You need to request a refund right now and pull out as soon as you can do so. And so, like, this, as soon as it was pointed out, people reacted immediately. Now, for dealers, it really depends. Some dealers aren't exactly situated as far as their market, their target audience, people that are actually going to be returning customers. They need to be able to survive, and how they survive is they go to conventions or they sell online. But in being able to go to conventions, you have face-to-face interactions with the customer, and you can be able to handle most interactions as need be. So this can be like life or death for some of these smaller like dealers, you know, especially when you buy locally. And if these are local dealers that are coming out here and hoping to make a buck from like sales to various customers that happen to be at the convention. Like, the implications of that email was that DenFur was going to cease to exist. And if it ceased to exist, that means that whatever money they paid to reserve a table, like, you know, in the dealer's room or the artist alley, whatever have you, they were no longer going to be able to go to the event, and they weren't going to make any money, and they were going to also be lost out of whatever money they gave to Corgi LLC to be able to vend there as a vendor, you know? So you can imagine the panic that ensued as various people were jumping up in arms and, like, you know, asking for answers. Now, that's what happened. That's how everybody found out about all this. But what actually happened right before, this was a reactionary sort of move. I'm still not entirely sure who sent the email out, but they obviously had access to the official email address that was considered part of the convention. All right, this wasn't just some random schmo that was like emailing people trying to give them the straight dope. This was somebody that had access to something official, you know. Presumably they didn't have access to it for very long because, well, I'll tell you a little bit, but people were immediately starting to point out, hey, like, you know, they were pointing out that this was exactly Corey Woods, aka like Treble. Treble, if you don't know, is the con chair of, you know, Corgi LLC and DenFur. More importantly, like DenFur, but like Corgi LLC, he's the owner. All right, and Corgi LLC runs a lot of different conventions, and so as a company, like, you know, it's sort of like an umbrella over all these various conventions. I think Sin City Mercon is one of the conventions. Salt Lake City FurCon is a convention. I don't remember them all off the top of my head because there's at least 5, DenFur included. But yeah, you can imagine the panic that ensued, and various people, immediately the perception of the general public was that DenFur was going to be no more, and that bastardly Corey Woods was going to make off with the dough. It's important to note that back in 2018, and this isn't like alleged anymore, this is something that was admitted to by Corey Woods, so don't think I'm, you know, just drumming up the past for no reason here. Lemon Brat, they're not a very They're a popular fursuit maker, but at the same time, like, they have controversies of their own. But there was a recurrent story that was perpetuated that they had allegedly been robbed of $40,000 plus by their financial manager. Who was the financial manager? I believe it had to do with Corgi LLC. More specifically, Corey Woods, aka Treble. It was through a conversation between two people that I got a sense that Corey Woods might be a CPA, a certified public accountant. If that's correct, then I'm curious as to whether or not they're the ones that are responsible for the financials and the bookkeeping of the operation. They can't be a very good accountant if they can't even keep records, but we'll get to that in a bit. But the case was settled out of court, and supposedly, like, people had approached Lemon Bread and were like, yo, do you want to make issue of this? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to, like, pursue this? And they said no every time. They're just like, you know, it's been settled. I want to walk away from this. Whatever. It was settled out of court. All right, and so Corey Woods, aka Treble, has already had some controversies as far as money. $40,000 is a fucking lot of money. All right, that you just embezzled. If you're curious how that's happened, it was through writing bogus checks, diverting funds like received from customers to like bank accounts that were not under the control of Lemon Brat as a company. And they were responsible for, like, you know, taking care of the bookkeeping. Now, whether or not they did so to adequate measure, when you're caught embezzling like $40,000 fucking dollars, obviously you're cooking the books a little bit, all right, to say the least. But that's from 2018, like close to the inception of DenFur as a convention, all right, because DenFur, if you're curious, like, DenFur was a reaction. It was a response to the collapse of Rocky Mountain Fur Con. And as a quick history lesson, Rocky Mountain Fur Con, it was considered to be a very controversial convention because the con chair was a convicted sex offender. Like, you know, supposedly they had an affinity towards kids, okay? Not a good look for the convention. And a lot of people didn't know this because it wasn't publicly broadcasted. It wasn't public knowledge. But it was found out, you know, that he was a convicted sex offender. You had somebody that was responsible for the bookkeeping that was a sovereign citizen. You know, took his thumbprint, like, stained it in red as a signature for official correspondence. Not very good. It's supposed to be like a symbol of sovereign citizens where you sign all of your correspondence in red ink with a thumbprint, kind of like you're signing it in your own blood, but that's neither here nor there. But why did Rocky Mountain Fur Con collapse? Well, it was a combination of public outcry and also tax evasion, or the owing of taxes, as well as the sudden increase in costs for security because you know, Diotaz Devil being an example, they made a tweet where it was like, I can't wait to punch some Nazis. And I don't think they were being very serious, all right? At least I hope not, because we don't really need, like, a bar brawl fight, like, taking place at a convention, all right? We really don't need that. We don't need any violence taking place at conventions, okay? That's just going to bring bad publicity on the rest of us and potentially cause some issues with the people hosting us, so hopefully not. But it was taken seriously. There was back and forth between various people on the left and right, literally. They turned political. So honestly, Diotaz Devil became famous overnight. She had a lot of fans, a lot of people willing to rally behind her, and Boozy Badger, like, he was a virtual no-name until he gave his own legal advice on everything that took place, and he became, like, e-famous, like, and popular, the de facto individual to consult for legal advice after the fact. So Rocky Mountain Fur Con, it collapsed due to unexpected expenses because the convention, when they found out about, like, all of this back and forth, death threats of violence and shit like that, they wanted to, like, have more security just in case a fight were to break out, heavens fucking forbid. But the convention couldn't afford that, on top of the taxes that they already owed. So they kind of collapsed. And then DenFur, from its inception, with various people that got involved. Like some names I can think of off the top of my head. As far as the, like, before it became a convention, when it was just being conceptualized, Corey Woods, aka Treble, Boileroo, potentially, Omnom, potentially. Omnom is confirmed only through conversations that he had with Treble. And I will go ahead and provide those in due time when it becomes relevant. But anyway, now that you know the history, Rocky Mountain FurCon itself was considered the stomping ground of the Furry Raiders. Who are the Furry Raiders? Well, they're a bunch of edgelords, memists, and basically like furry trash that would probably belong more on Poll on 4chan than in the furry fandom. But hey, neither here nor there. Rocky Mountain FurCon was considered their stomping ground. It was also considered to be a den of, like, transphobia, hatred, and bigotry. So a change was necessary, and DenFur was supposed to be a convention by which everyone but the Furry Raiders were going to be able to come in. Furry Raiders would not be allowed to wear their armband or auspicious armband or anything like that. They would not be able to engage in what the con staff believed to be transphobia, homophobia, bigotry, and racism. They wouldn't be able to be the nuisances that a lot of the fandom considers them to be. Whether or not you believe this personally, far be it for me to criticize you one way or the other, but I will say this. I met Foxler, and I've interacted with Foxler in the past. When I first met the guy, it was at Biggest Little FurCon, and he seemed very polite and soft-spoken. Now, here's what bothered me a little bit at the time. He was wearing an armband. The armband was red with a white spot in the middle, and had a paw print in the very middle of the white spot. What does that fucking remind you of? It's kind of, you know what, never mind. Not particularly relevant to what we're talking about right now. But like, as far as the other Furry Raiders are concerned, Foxer's the only one I really ever knew. And at the time, he didn't seem that bad. Like, I wouldn't share with him intimate secrets or details about me, but like, as somebody just to talk to, it was just like, whatever. I've known very controversial people. Unfortunately, this was like years before I found out that he was, you know, convicted of grooming a minor. That happened a couple years later, you know, on top of him trying to join a white supremacist organization because he wanted to see what they were all about. You know, Foxer, he's certainly an agent of chaos. I don't think he's doing this because he's like genuinely like a Nazi or anything like that. He wants to do all this because he knows it's going to get somebody's goat. It's going to earn him the infamy and the animosity from the rest of the fandom. However, his actions, he reminds me of a friend I had back in the day. And my friend, he would just do shit to do shit. Like, he was doing donuts in a church parking lot, lost control of the car, smashed it against the curb, and just did it because he felt like it. And he lied to his parents and said, hey, I lost control of the car at the last second, and they actually bought it. He stole something from work because it had a price tag of $0 on it, and he thought that was like, you know, something that was just a promotional item that he could have taken, and he got fired for it because he was at a warehouse, and you're not supposed to do that. Foxer, he exhibits a lot of the similar behavior. Otherwise bright in some cases, otherwise very retarded in other ones. Yeah. Anyway, not very relevant to the story. Okay, why do I mention Foxer? Well, Foxer and the other Furry Raiders, Rocky Mountain FurCon was their con. At least that was the perception by the fandom. Whether or not that was the case, that really depends on you, but the con staff at Rocky Mountain FurCon were certainly tolerant of all, like, peoples, regardless of who they were and what they were all about. The Furry Raiders included, and they were either tolerant or loosely supportive of. DenFur wanted to change that. So DenFur was supposed to be the rallying point to have an actual, like, furry convention in Colorado built on the premise of catering to, like, you know, the mainstream of the furry fandom. Like, people that felt like the Furry Raiders were just a nuisance and they wanted a good place to have a convention. Like, you know, predominantly leftist furries, but hey, whatever. They deserve a con space as much as the rest of us. So, The problems already I told you, okay? Lemon Brat, like, you know, being robbed of $40,000 through, you know, what's criminal activity. And Corey Woods was caught for that, and they settled out of court. So, whether or not they were actually going to do that remains to be seen. Okay, so let's cycle it along back to here. DenFur actually had a couple of years of resounding success. Several thousand employees, not employees, like attendees, at least 2,000 in the first year, give or take, I think. And, you know, they were doing pretty well for themselves. They had a decent relationship with the hotel, although a change of leadership created some friction between DenFur and, or I should say, Corgi LLC and the con space that they were going to host this at. All right, well, that's revealed later. So, what about today? What's going on? What happened last week? What's crazy is that the immediate response from the rest of the furry fandom was largely focused on the fact that, like, Treble was basically coming out publicly and talking to people. And then people are just like, well, are you going to process my refund? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And, like, rather than respond directly, like, to their issue, he would fall back on the excuse of, like, hang on, like, it's like 12 o'clock in the morning, I'm doing all this myself. And it's like, if you have time to respond to the general public with, honestly, like, if you look at it publicly, like, messages that aren't that important, you're just kind of placating the masses, trying to tell them something so that you can buy yourself a little time. That doesn't inspire confidence that you're, like, the refunds that people are requesting are actually going to go through. And what's funny is that not too long after the original email had gone out, another email, a follow-up email from the same, like, you know, web address, the same, like, you know, email address, comes out and says, please disregard the prior email. It was completely fallacious, misinformation. It was all lies. Like, you know, DenFur is going to happen as it was intended to be. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please direct them at us, and we're going to continue operations as intended. And it didn't really convince anybody, because the damage of the first email was already done. Why was the email of the first, like, why was the first email circulated at all? Apparently, Treble had fired Koi Vixen, aka Bubbles, who has proven to be a very controversial individual in the fandom, like, to begin with. For the most part, I looked into the Google Docs that's circulating about them, and it really seems to center on them being a quote-unquote Nazi, that they accepted a lot of money from friends that they claimed was for, you know, such things as going to school or college or, like, you know, but then using that money and buying a fursuit or something like that. Is literally just goes on and on and on. They've also ripped people off, like, you know, monetarily. Nowhere near the amount of, like, Treble and his $40,000 from Lemon Brat. But, like, still, just looking at the interactions they've had with people, yeah, you gotta wonder. So, Koi Vixen was, but, like, that's the negative side. The positive side is Koi Vixen, by a lot of people's accounts, busted their ass to make sure that Corgi LLC, DenFur included, that the events that taken place under that umbrella, Corgi LLC, Corgi Events LLC, would happen as smoothly and properly as possible. Like, they busted their ass, they went above and beyond. Treble seemed to have taken them for granted and considered them to be an employee. Whether or not they had an employer-employee relationship, I don't know, but it seemed like they were friends. And then Treble, through his own incompetence and arrogance, kind of just, like, treated them as an employee. And you can't be doing that if you have somebody that is doing things outside of their normal job description. Koi Vixen seemed to have been, like, you know, the support staff from behind the scenes that would make sure that an event happened as smoothly and promptly as possible. They seem like the operations girl. But a lot of people really do not like Bubbles, aka Koi Vixen. They have a lot of fucking names. They keep changing their fucking names. They have a ton of usernames. It's a little bit suspicious, and considering that their, like, tweets and like communications and Twitter are protected, that makes me just a little bit suspicious, you know? Just a little bit. But I guess it would go without saying that her firing would elicit some negative reactions from people that knew her. More specifically, the person that sent out the email. I still have no idea who the person is that actually sent out the email. I was under the impression that it was, you know, Coy Vixen, honestly. It would have made sense, you know, one last fuck you right before they managed to leave, like, without any repercussions and create a shitstorm for Treble to deal with. But no, like, supposedly it was actually a friend that reacted to Coy Vixen being fired. There were a lot of different people that were fired. I don't even know how some of the people like Foxler got access to the, like, chat room in which, like, you know, con staff were chatting, but they did. And they showcased that there was a long list of just immediate firings. And I was just sort of looking at that, and I'm like, God damn, Treble, you trying to be like a Donald Trump on The Apprentice? You're fired.
You're fired.
But yeah, this was a malicious, like, move on the part of one of the con staffers that, you know, was affiliated with Coy Vixen. And lover or hater, like Boileroo, they gushed over how Coy had gone above and beyond helping Treble out run Corgi Events LLC. And that Treble, you know, he basically took her for granted, and that he had been musing for a long time whether or not to actually fire Coy Vixen, and various people had told him, if you do that, we're quitting, okay? And I've seen things like this, like, you know, I had a friend, and it was his first day on the job. He has to go to his supervisor and get training. His supervisor tells him, dude, I don't know if anybody told you, but, like, this is actually my last day. I'm going to be quitting. Like, I already put my 2 weeks in, like, actually, no. He did not put his 2 weeks in. He was quitting effective that day on his own personal terms, you know? So he did not put any notice in. He was just leaving. And my friend was, like, put into an awkward situation, and it's like, go see Josh down the hall, all right? He'll train you. So my friend goes to see Josh down the hall and says, yeah, Mike's apparently quitting today, and he says that you're my trainer. And when Josh heard that, he's just like, yo, no, Mike's quitting? Oh, fuck this, dude. I gotta quit. 5 people quit in the same day when they found out that, like, Mike quit. And obviously the names are made up to protect the innocent, but yeah, it shows that certain people, they're a pillar of the organization, and when they're gone, people aren't going to put up with the bullshit that they're going to leave in their wake. So I understand that there's a lot of controversy out there surrounding Coy Vixen. I'm not saying that they're a great individual, but as far as what they meant to DenFur, they seem like a very, like, good event organizer, and at the very least a supportive staff that was helping keeping everything afloat. Alright, so, you know, initial email goes out, everyone's up in arms, angry, like, furious about that. Follow-up email comes out. People do not believe the follow-up email. As official as it sounds, it's just, like, too good to be true. People feel like they're a little bit distrustful of Corey Woods, aka Treble, at this point. They're just like, dude, this guy is sus as fuck. We want our money, and we want to get the hell out of Dodge. Metaphorically speaking. And you had various artists, dealers, and other people that were considering attending DenFur. People that had paid in for the pleasure to be a dealer at DenFur, saying, unfortunately, due to, like, recent events, we will no longer be vending at DenFur due to the change of, like, you know, everything that's happened up to this point. And you gotta understand something. Whatever damage that first email did, that was strong, like, emotional damage to anybody involved. Like, you know, the confidence of the general public that this is a convention that's being run, like, you know, solidly, that we can actually trust. And I'm talking about from, like, the dealer's point of view, that, you know, public confidence was completely lost from that point. If you were a dealer and you were considering going to DenFur to be a dealer, you were no longer considering it after that point. Because, like, you know, an insider already said, hey, Corey Woods is going to make off with the money. It's already happened before with Lemon Brad. It's going to happen again. It doesn't surprise me at all that various like artists and dealers were going to pull out. And the worst thing about it is when, so this is done through Eventbrite, but it's also done like, you know, through, I guess, proprietary, like, you know, methodology to buy into being a part of Corgi LLC. I should say DenFur, like being a dealer there. Like people were requesting refunds, and like when various people like Treble said, hey, use the website, request a refund, we'll get right back to you. The email was down. Like the email address would give you a 404 message. It was not working. It would bounce. Like whatever communications you sent to that would just bounce. So yeah, that's a good sign right there, right? That made people even more nervous. Stress was starting to build. A lot of people were stressed the fuck out because, you know, they're going to be out like what, several $100s for like, you know, this event. It could be even more than that depending on what function they actually had, like how big a table they had or like how many tables they had. You don't know. Like you and I, we're not like, you know, entrepreneurs, or we don't have like vendor status. We don't have a product to sell per se. So we don't know, like, you know, the stress, especially if you're a small business just trying to make it in this cruel, merciless, like capitalistic world. You don't know. Like, I can certainly sympathize. I can't empathize because I've never been in that situation. Anyway, so various people have sort of come out of the woodwork to give their 2 cents about all of their interactions they had with Corey Woods, aka Treble. Omnom, if you don't know who Omnom is, they were an acquaintance of mine that I would routinely see at conventions. I loved Omnom. I loved their wife Splat the Fennec, or Splat Fennec. They were both lovely. They were a lovely couple, is what I'll say. Omnom's a squirrel, but apparently he was like in close association, at least in one point of time, with Corey Woods. And he even shared his communications with Corey more recently about the whole DenFur drama. And it was alluded to that, like through conversation, that Corey Woods was an accountant, like a CPA. And it's from there that, like, you know, as Omnom is basically saying, yo, like, what the fuck is up with this? It's weird because Corey Woods is like, yo, like, you know, you're just upset I fired you. You're just upset I fired your wife. And, like, Omnom's just laughing at that because it's just like, dude, like, I quit. I didn't get fired. I quit. I quit before DenFur even became a thing because I saw the writing on the wall. I saw that you were a sus as fuck individual that was probably not going to do well in running a convention. All right? Omnom, he doesn't want to be involved with this anymore than what's already been stated, so I didn't reach out to him for comment. I didn't reach out to him for a follow-up. I'm just going to take their tweets and show them as they are. They haven't been deleted or anything like that on his end, so I think that's no harm, no foul. But no, it shows that how emotionally invested that Omnom was, that he had a friend in Corey Woods, and that Corey Woods, through their own ineptitude and their own arrogance and their own bad actions, has led up to this point of creating a problem for everybody else. And it also looks even worse, given the fact that at the very last minute, like, you know, Treble's basically telling everybody, okay, use your own personal credit cards to secure a room, alright? I had to take funds from the con store to pay for or stay at the hotel to secure space for this convention to take off. It looks like so much material just circulating around. Red flags were starting to pile up, okay? Like, apart from Treble's ineptitude. And I already said, like, him trying to placate the concerns of the general public by coming out and responding to people like one after the other. It's like, if you got all this time and people are going to ask you, like, are you doing anything about the issue? Or are you just like, you know, if you have all this time to say basically bullshit, just to like say something to get people to calm down, then why aren't you solving the problem of getting them their refunds, or at least ensuring that they will receive their refunds, instead of just like sending out useless messages? Because when people would ask about the status of the refund, he would just be like, oh, like, you know, it's really late. I'm getting really tired. It's like close to 12 o'clock at night. And it's just like, well, you have time to tweet like all night. So why don't you have time to fix the problem or at least work on it?
Go work on it. I'm working on it.
Or find somebody that can fix the problem. So I'm under the impression that because like Treble had fired so many people in such a short amount of time, there was really nobody left to support, you know, like the operations as they would go on. Treble is looking like he's at fault for all this. Whatever they did, whatever they said to their con staff, that like basically the staffers that were by his side serving as his team, whatever he said and did, like seemed to have rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And various people like Bad Girl, sorry, her name's actually Sparks, but like Bad Girl is what you see on Twitter. Sparks, all right, so they came out and they were just basically saying, hey, I've been like hosting web hosting like free of charge for a long damn time with the promise that I was going to get paid back in the future. I pulled that shit down, and for a while I could not access Corgi LLC or like, you know, DenFur.org or anything like that. I just couldn't do it. Now if you access the website, it says something a little bit different. Like it just says a message pertaining to the drama that's taking place right now. But at the time, like when I first like noticed that, I was just like, God damn, it's all down. Like it was all offline. So I was, you know, I sort of lend credence in what Bad Girl said, but basically they pulled the plug. They were done with Treble constantly promising like to pay them back in the future, and that this was it. They were done with it. They were just going to pull the plug and walk away. That seems like a lot of people that were close, like to DenFur and to Treble, at least in a working relationship sense. I don't know what their friendships were like outside of DenFur. Like Chai Vixen even like was just pointing out like various things that were happening along the way. Chai, I believe it's the same Chai that is referenced in a document circulated by Boiler Room. Boiler Room was an OG, okay? They were the prior, like, con chair, but they stepped down, enabling, like, Treble to take the reins as the con chairman. Boiler Room, they were an OG. A lot of people laid faith in what Boiler Room had to say, and continues to say, and they basically shed a lot of light as to who Treble is as an individual. The dynamic that he shared with his con, like, team, the team of staffers that were supposed to support, run the convention, like, to the best of their abilities. The dynamic was that Corey was largely absent and didn't seem like very assertive when it came down to like tackling problems. In fact, there's a news story like from an anime convention that basically purports that Corey actually, you know, basically stood up. He didn't stand up for, but he didn't take like decisive action against somebody that was basically guilty of rape. All right. The victim didn't want to press charges because, like, I guess out of sheer embarrassment and stuff like that and sheer shame. I've never been raped, and I can only assume that, like, people that have been raped, that's obviously something that's going to incur, like, PTSD on you. You're not going to be functioning normally after that. You're going to be gripped with, like, you know, fear and absolute devastation in light of that. But, you know, this girl had been taken advantage of, and the cops, you know, they tried to press charges, but without a witness's testimony or, like, statement, they can't really do a whole lot. And Corey Woods, rather than, like, lend credence to the idea of, like, people that were on the con staff that were expressing concerns about this Ryan Top, I can't really pronounce that too well, but, like, he just was tone deaf to it all. And, like, Ryan might have been ejected from an event or two, but apart from, like, you know, getting arrested, that never took place. Corey seemed to have covered up for him, which is one of the various things that he's done, either through, like, laziness, inaction, or just not giving a fuck about the situation, hoping it all goes away. That's what it seems like the recurrent theme here, the more I find out about Treble. Maybe they're not necessarily a bad dude apart from stealing $40,000 from Lemon Brat, which they admitted to. but they certainly seem like the lazy guy who's willing to take the easy way out, regardless of how much damage it's going to cause in the future, when inevitably the bullshit bubbles up over the cauldron and like gets everywhere and like affects everyone. Apparently he abuses alcohol, like he's an alcoholic. That's what Boiler Roo attests to. And at every fucking time, like, alcohol would be, like, you know, at the core of his demons. That he was an alcoholic. I'm not entirely sure if he was always an alcoholic, or maybe if the stress of having to run something that's way over his head was getting to him. I'm sure it's a mixture of the two. But wait! There's more! There actually is more to the story than just what I mentioned so far, because if you thought that I was sort of working myself up to some sort of grand conclusion or revelation here, I'm going to disabuse you of that notion fairly quickly, just by mentioning that, yeah, so far I have made Treble, like, I've made Treble out to be some sort of nefarious cartoon-style villain that was sort of tweezling his little mustache as he was, you know, straightening out his top hat, getting ready to make off with the dough. It has been alleged by Omnom that he has bragged about embezzling all that money from Lemon Brat, that he made off with the money and that he just, you know, disappeared, like Lemon Brat couldn't touch him. And he was caught for $40,000. Supposedly, it's actually closer to $120K. That's what Omnom alleges. And various people out there, you know, some of the more astute individuals that have been able to sort of parse the information as it stands and make interpretations based on two existing tax liens that already exist. There's a new one, a third one. The third one is $87,000. Now, a lot of people reacted by saying, like, hey, that $87,000, he's making off with the money. He's stealing $87,000. That's not the case, all right? The $87,000 is actually a tax lien placed on the business. Presumably Corey Woods as well, like, as in his wages, whatever he earns from this point onwards, is going to be garnished. It's a lien, not money that he made off with. The fact of the matter is, we don't actually know how much money has been, like, you know, embezzled over the years, like through operations and such like that. This is like 5 different conventions that, you know, are known, and presumably Corgi Events LLC is actually responsible for a whole lot more. But yeah, even Boozy Badger weighed in on these circumstances in the situation, just saying that a lien is indicative of non-payment of taxes. What's interesting is that one of the liens, one's for like about $7,000 and the other's for about $20K. The $20K, it lists what the intended purpose of the funds were. Both of them do. One of them was for like payment of employees, but also payment for like utilities. That seems pretty par for the course if you're running an event, right? Here's what gets weird. The $20K one, that's for, it was intended for the payment of like staff, personnel, people that are working for you. And if that's not the, like, if that's not what it was used for, then I guess, you know, Corey was fined. Or maybe the state is just like, yo, you said that you used $20,000 on your books to pay these people, but you didn't assess for, you know, like any taxes that were owed to the state or local government or what have you. So maybe they got him that way. But it was impressive that people could sort of read between the lines and just point out some fairly basic things. You know, it's like Benjamin Franklin always said, you know, like, the two certainties in life are death and taxes. If you don't pay the tax man, he's gonna fuck your shit right up. Anyway, so I've been making Treble, I've been making him out to be this bad, nefarious person whose very presence is like an 1800s style cartoon villain, where he's just tweezling his mustache as he's straightening his top hat, playing on how he's gonna make off with the dough. I can't really say as to who Treble is, what his mode of character is. I can certainly say that he seems to be a troubled individual. My impression of him, given everything that I'm aware of up to this point, is that he's way in over his head and that he had a lot of good people, well, I should say effective people. Whether or not they're good morally, that's really for you to decide, but people that were competent enough to excel at their stated position. For instance, Coy Vixen. There's a whole lot more individuals involved, but, you know, I can't memorize everybody that was involved along the way, all right? There's just so much documentation, and trying to look into the identities of each and every one of them is a little bit painstaking. Maybe I'm going to have to make a follow-up to this video and, like, sort of draw out a graph in, like, a presentation room and just be, like, making the correlations. This person has this kind of relationship with this person, that person has this relationship with somebody, and, like, make it an accurate presentation of all, like, information that I have access to in a more, you know, structured and factually, like, accurate way. That's a consideration. But anyway, as far as Treble goes, he certainly has a history of controversy and bad actions that were undertaken. In fact, Omnom went so far as to say that allegedly, you know, Treble had bragged about how he robbed, like, you know, lemon bread of, like, thousands upon thousands of dollars, you know, and that he finally, like, see, here's the thing about Treble. At first, in responding to the general public, everybody that was expressing concerns about the future of the event and whether or not an event was actually going to be taking place, and whether or not they were going to receive a refund if they requested for it, you know, he at first denied the allegations, and then later on he admitted to them. He's like, you know, I already admitted to this, it's done and gone. It's like, you can't just flip-flop between it never happened and, oh, I already admitted to it, so I don't need to admit to this again. It's like Schrodinger's crime. Like, did you do it or did you not do it? You were caught with your hands in the cookie jar and you got burned for it. All right. Like, that should be... See, like, the numbers are closer to 120K. So that certainly raises my eyebrow a little bit. How much more money could have, like, just been lost to the ether? Because remember, like, running those 5 conventions, the implication that somebody pointed out is that a lot of the money that is, like, you know, spent for the creation of this event, DenFur, like, buy furries, for furries, to furries, the perception that some people had is that they don't like the fact that the money's not going back into the furry fandom. It's being taken out and being paid for something else, presumably to support the other conventions, some of which are furry related, some of which are not. But far be it for me to, like, really just dig deep into that line of thought. Anyway, alright, now that you have a basic understanding of all the key players involved, as well as the circumstances of what was truly at stake, as well as the past history that led us up to the events of today, I can go ahead and progress with the story. Now, the back and forth that was taking place on Twitter was not going away. Various artists, dealers, and friends of dealers and fans of dealers and artists were all fumigating and stressed out that DenFur as a convention was never going to happen. Now, I would just like to quickly state, I don't really, like, truly believe, like, that first email that went out. I don't believe for a second that, like, DenFur was just going to spontaneously collapse and that Treble was just going to make off with the money. But it's also a distinct possibility, mostly given the fact that Treble, as an individual, he doesn't seem particularly stable. He doesn't seem particularly good at managing funds. And if that was one of his core responsibilities in running DenFur, then it's entirely possible that if money ever became an issue, then he would just divert funds from DenFur to pay for some of the other conventions that take place. It's not something that other people haven't already speculated upon, but it seems increasingly likely that, given, like, my just impression of Treble, bear in mind, I don't know Treble personally, I've never spoken to the guy, I probably maybe seen his fursuit once or twice, but I've never, like, had a mano-a-mano conversation with the guy, and I've never had exposure to who he is, what his mode of character is, and what he's all about. All I can really go off of is what has been attested to and proven actions in bad faith. But, yeah, you know, Treble was trying to put out fires. He was trying to muster what remained of his con staff, and he wanted to sort of respond to all of this, like, you know, adequately, but also in an official capacity. It's from there that you got to see official correspondences being distributed, like, far and wide. I'll go ahead and read the first one. This isn't the email that was basically a follow-up to the original email that started this whole thing. This is an actual letter, something that you can actually see when you go to denfur.org. So it's dated February 9th, 2022, and Corgi Events LLC is in the letterhead. Good evening, all Corgi Events attendees, dealers, artists, and staff. I wanted to send out a letter here to let everyone know that the prior email from us regarding anything involved, anything monetary, is 100% inaccurate, invalid, and untrue. We here at Corgi Events are in no shape or form filing bankruptcy, stealing money from the company, and we are continuing to have conventions for at minimum via our contracts for the next 3 years. I want to apologize to anyone who felt distressed, frightened, concerned, or apprehensive over any emails, Telegram messages, Twitter posts, Discord messages, or otherwise that has been said or shared. There are rumors going around that I owe employees upwards of $80K. This is grossly untrue and a major exaggeration of a minor misunderstanding. We here at Corgi Events LLC put our attendees, dealers, artists, and staff's comfort above our own. Regarding the current situation, there was a recent employee who was released from the company who held the position of Corgi Events LLC operator of events. Due to this, there has been some backlash due to this decision. This decision was not made out of spite and is not related to any previous actions or decisions that the individual has made. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to email treble@corgievents.com. If for any reason this uncertainty has caused you any distrust, unrest, or disbelief, and you'd like to either transfer or refund your DD table assistant badge, please email refunds@corgievents.org, and we will refund transfer you as soon as we are able to. Thank you for your understanding, and I hope to see you at future Corgi events. Treble Van Doren. Doesn't that sound sweet? So nicely packed in a neat little bow. The problem is emailing refunds@corgievents.org, as previously mentioned, would lead to an error, basically that your email was undeliverable and the web address as listed and stated was incorrect. Yeah, not a very good look, but it's dated like February 9th. And so there was also a secondary official statement. So, the official statement that followed up to all of that sort of cap everything over. In light of everyone sort of fumigating about all this and responding to the official correspondence that was released, you know, you could probably imagine that furry Twitter was the least bit cynical and doubtful of any of Treble's like official statements or correspondences or anything that they stated in a public capacity. So, this started a new motion. And the new motion was going to be that Corgi Events LLC was not going to be a for-profit company as it had been operated up to this point, but it was going to turn into a non-profit. That the non-profit had to take time to get the paperwork through and to establish itself as a legally incorporated entity, or like a legal entity of some sort for tax purposes and various other things because, you know, they're going to be receiving cash and stuff like that. And that, like, you know, the position of con chair and operations was going to be divested from Corey Woods. Now, in light of all that, people were cheering that DenFur was still going to be happening, that DenFur was absolutely going to be taking place, and that we were going to be able to attend DenFur in the near future. The problem with that is that Corey Woods didn't just go away, all right? They didn't just spontaneously disappear and, like, divest themselves from the company or declare bankruptcy or anything like that. What they did was they assumed the role of advisor. And there's even con chats that have been circulating from Telegram that attest to the idea that Corey Woods is still going to be very much involved. They're going to be in an advisory position, and they're going to be lending their equipment for the continuation of operations at DenFur in an official capacity. So you can understand the concerns that various people throughout the community had, because these same individuals were laying all of the blame on Corey Woods. They were laying all the blame, all of the misfortune, all of his bad actions up to this point on him, squarely on his head. And it's at this point that I had a weird sort of sense of ambivalence, that it seemed almost too perfect. You know, you don't just spontaneously see like a cartoon villain spring up that, you know, whose very liquid piss is liquid malevolence. You don't usually see that especially if they're in a position of leadership, because you kind of need some sense of, competence to be able to sit in that position and for people to have confidence in your abilities to lead. I don't see it as a spontaneous thing either, because DenFur has been in operation for a couple years, and, this sort of just kind of sprang up out of the blue. I say out of the blue by our perception, but given the fact that everybody came forward to share their experiences with Treble, the perspectives that they had on the situation at large and their concerns, this is clearly an issue that didn't just spring up out of nowhere. This is clearly something that had been building for years, especially if prior interactions between he and Coy are anything to go off of. The fact that Treble was, pondering whether or not to fire Coy, presumably for differences of opinion, presumably for differences of personality, we don't know, but there was a secondary correspondence that was released, alright? And this one was a little bit less formal because it's just on a blank sort of letterhead, and I'll just go ahead and read it. It was actually shared by another convention, whose name I don't really know off the top of my head, but hello everybody. Many people out there depend on the conventions hosted by Corgi Events LLC, be it for financial reasons, personal identity reasons, or mental health reasons. These include ourselves as we draft this open letter to the community. Over this past week, there has been a firestorm of rumors, lies, truths, hurt feelings, and more. These have not been healthy for so many people throughout the furry fandom, and answers are needed. Please bear with us as we get you the answers you are requesting. We are willing to share what information we have, but please understand that it is still early in the process. We have been asking two main questions over and over again. What is going to happen to Corgi Events, and what is Treble's involvement? While there are many decisions to be made, ultimately Corgi Events LLC is going to cease to exist. Several members of the fandom have already stepped forward and will complete the formation of a new nonprofit organization. Control of all Corgi Events LLC holdings will be secured by this nonprofit organization, including some of the obligations that Corgi Events LLC has accrued. We have already begun this process of the forming of this new nonprofit organization. However, this process takes time, and as we will provide updates as they come. Secondly, is the concern of Treble. We do not know anything that is going on in his personal life. However, we do hold to the following regarding Corgi Events LLC and the new nonprofit organization. Treble is the one who created Corgi Events, and with the help of other parties has created several major events that we care deeply for. Instead of letting everything crash and burn, he has agreed to this transfer of property and responsibility to the new nonprofit organization. Treble is neither a board member of the new nonprofit organization, nor is it our intention to make him one. The conventions DenFur, Golden State FurCon, GSFC, Painted Desert FurCon, PDFC, and AquaFur, AQF, will be continuing as scheduled. With regards to the Sin City MurCon, we will have more information at a later date. If there are any reasons this uncertainty has caused you any distrust, unrest, or disbelief, and you'd like to either transfer or refund your dealer's den table and or your dealer's assistant badge, please email refunds@corgievents.com, which is now controlled by the nonprofit organization. The new nonprofit board of directors are from many different regions. More importantly, we are all from the states where all of the conventions are held, so we can keep your cons local. The board of directors are all volunteers. Please bear with us as the new nonprofit team is working to update and move the websites to new servers. Please keep an eye out on your social media for each event to update and link. In closing, more information will be forthcoming. Please give us time to get things set up, and we will be sharing more with you all as soon as we are able. Amazon, Kiggy, Maxwell, Nova, Rory, Von Bon, Wolf the Tech, Zeno. The Board of Directors of Anthropomorphic Events Incorporated Organization Untitled. Wow. That was certainly a mouthful. Sorry, I had to look up, I had to prevent a, a nosebleed. Nah, I'm kidding. I had like the way that I set up my virtual desktop, I just kind of had to look up a little bit to make sure that I could read this accurately. I know I flub my words here and there, but hey, I'm not perfect, all right? So, what does that all mean? Well, this is the official correspondence that was set forth with their intention that they have established a nonprofit, at least conceptually. Officially, it's not quite there yet, because you don't just spontaneously declare yourself, hey, I'm going to make a nonprofit right here and have it be official from then on. There needs to be some paperwork involved. There needs to be some clear contracts and understandings between the people that are going to be running this thing. So, with that all to be stated, I guess it comes down to reflecting on what happened from there. While all this was going on, refunds were being processed through both Eventbrite, but also through the efforts of one Rory Fox. Rory Fox really seems like one of the saviors that sort of came out and actually was emailing people individually and saying, like, specifying, hey, like, I'm going to go ahead and process your refund. Can you give me some information? And it's like, your refund has been processed. You have a nice day now. Obviously, that's terrible for the convention's health and well-being at large, because you kind of need that contribution of funds to support operations, but in light of the various circumstances, people aren't willing to take chances. Now, what is the TLDR to this? Like, before we continue, the TLDR is that a spiteful former employee had decided to write a malicious letter. Or maybe it wasn't malicious. Maybe they genuinely felt that Corey Woods was going to make off with the money like they did with Lemon Brat and declare bankruptcy and have plausible deniability when people came asking for like where their money was, where their refund was in the future. I have no idea because I do not know the motivations of the individual. I can only speculate that their motivations was as a sort of like, you know, retaliatory action in light of Coy Vixen getting fired. And a lot of people were fired. It wasn't just Coy Vixen. It was a lot of fucking people that were just kind of removed from the con staff chat room. Whether or not they were actually staffers themselves or just close affiliates and advisors, I don't know. What I can tell you is that various con staff or people that were closely affiliated with the convention spoke out to great length on everything that they had experienced with DenFur. And there was sort of a mixture of laying the blame squarely at Treble's feet, while also wistfully remarking about how beautiful DenFur was. That was a great convention, that they absolutely loved their times there, and that they would go above and beyond to ensure that DenFur would be a successful convention. For all intents and purposes, for a great length of time, it had been a successful convention. Thankfully, a lot of people, like, refunds were promised yesterday up till today. Now, there was some initial confusion as to whether or not there would actually be a refund, because initially, Treble was saying if you'd like to transfer, like, you know, the funds that you've contributed for a table from this year to next year, that can be done, like, but he wasn't saying anything about a refund at first. Refunds came later, and Eventbrite had processed people's refunds. Word was spread that people were getting their refunds, so that's pretty good. At least one issue was squared away and taken care of. The only other issues are the lingering questions. Who was the identity of the person that sent out that first email? Because they basically, they threw a lot of shit in Treble's face in a relatively short span of time. I think that Treble is showcasing, like, a lot of behaviors that would mark him as a scumbag, but if alcohol is involved, that would indicate to me that they're not exactly the most stable individual. Now, again, whether or not the alcoholism has been brought on by, like, just a bad habit over the years, or if this is a response to all the stress and expectations that have been laying on his shoulders, I wouldn't know, because I don't know the guy. But, like, still, people are willing to hold, like, Treble accountable for all of this. They point out the various tax liens that have been levied against him, and recurrently, if, like, Sparks, aka Bad Girl, can be, like, believed, then Treble has the history of promising somebody, like, you know, he has a history of promising somebody that he'll pay them back, but never does. You know, it's that mooch of a friend that always promises to, like, pay you back if you buy them lunch today, and then they never do. And, like, it's like one lunch turns into 2 lunches, 3 lunches, 4 lunches, 5 lunches. And unless you're keeping track, it could be hundreds of dollars that you've been spending over the course of a couple years, like paying for your friend to have a good meal when they promise they pay you back and they never do, and they never really contribute to you. That's the feeling that I'm starting to get with Treble. Like, in Treble's mind, in the moment, it's not that big of a deal, alright? It's just a little favor here, a couple $100 there. But that fucking shit adds up. Like, you already saw Spark saying, like, hey, I've been paying for, like web hosting on my servers for a long damn time now, and, like, I was never paid back for the money that I was promised and owed, so I'm pulling the plug. And she did, and she talked about it, and she contributed to, like, this firestorm of, like, lies, deception, misinformation, and disinformation. So, again, I don't really believe that Treble is completely at fault here. I feel like it was an amalgamation of various events that has led us up to today. In fact, a friend of mine, my good old boy, Delirious Jax, he actually stated that he used to be a part of all this. He used to be a staffer himself and, like, was deeply involved with some of these individuals. And that what he couldn't help but notice is that this was a small community of liars, cheats, and thieves that would no sooner backstab you if they had the opportunity for any reason or no reason, if you got in their way or anything like that. I got a hint of that in that Google Docs that was sort of a beware of Coy Vixen because, like, you know, sort of manipulative behavior. Instead of telling your friend everything, you compartmentalize which friends that you tell which pieces of information to at any given time to mitigate the possibility that word will spread about the bad actions of somebody or yourself in the face of controversy. That I fully believe. But yeah, as far as a resolution goes, the TLDR here is refunds are being doled out. There was the uncertainty for the longest time. The whole crux of the reason here is that a lot of people weren't sure that DenFur was going to be happening and that refunds were going to be doled out. They had no idea whether or not they were going to get their money back. And I can certainly get that. That is, and like everything that I mentioned in this video up to this point, that was people basically pointing the blame game at the various bad actors that were involved. Delirious Jax is one of the few people that, like, less points the blame on Treble and more puts the blame on everybody that Treble had around them. Factor in the alcoholism, and if Boiler Roo's testimony of events can be believed, a lot of people vouch for him. So you know, it's really not for me to say one way or the other if their testimony is absolute fact or absolute fiction or perhaps just their perspective. But Corey is somebody that needs some help. They probably need to get some counseling for their alcoholism and put down the bottle and drink in moderation if they're going to be drinking at all. Because the fact of the matter is, I genuinely believe, apart from him embezzling fucking hundreds of thousands of dollars from Lemon Brat and various other parties over the years, maybe they're not as much of a piece of shit as everybody says they are. Maybe they're just somebody that is in way too deep over their head and they need some help. And the help that they were getting was enabling bad behavior that sort of led us up to today. And now they're trying to play catch up. Because, you know, I was getting on their case about not promptly responding to communications that were levied at him in regards to the, like, refunds and the conditions of the convention and stuff like that. Granted, he wasn't exactly making himself look good on Twitter the past few days. He wasted time that he could have used to either, like, help the situation or find somebody that could help the situation and got into useless arguments, like with Nom. And Nom swears up and down that from this point onwards, like, in spite of the fact that there's going to be a nonprofit at the head of this whole organization, that DenFur is going to be managed by this newly conceptualized nonprofit, given the fact that Treble is even still present, like, I'm pretty sure that the letters I read, that was just huff and bluff, alright? Like, Omnom believes that Treble is still going to be at the head of this. They're still going to be the con chair, that they're still going to be calling the shots, and that the only reason that letter was sent out is just a song and dance to appease the masses and placate our concerns and ensure that operations run smoothly in the future, and that you can continue to give this new, like, organization your hard-earned money so you can content, like, you know, furrykins and, like, have things as they were. But, like, he doesn't believe that anything's going to change. And it's entirely feasible, given the fact that, like, such a rapid transfer of power from one individual that had, like, all this under control to another, that is a very fucking quick turnaround, okay? So yeah, all of this to say that we like DenFur, the controversy surrounding DenFur up to this point, I haven't even gotten into like some things that are more relevant to the surrounding area. I'm going to in a couple minutes here, but I just want to sort of like end things on a note. People were talking about it very recently about the transfer of power from Treble to this new board of directors that is going to be managing this nonprofit. Some people are hopeful. They think that DenFur is going to continue as it had been, as it should be. Other people are not so convinced. They think that Treble and his bad actions are going to continue to go on. That the buck did not stop here. It's going to continue on going in the near future. Entirely feasible, but a lot of people do genuinely seem to love DenFur as a convention, and they want it to continue. They want it to be a place they can go to, but a lot of people are sad now because they think that DenFur is going to go away. So, the actions of one spiteful employee had opened a floodgate of controversy that suddenly became public knowledge. Everybody was airing their dirty laundry, and the crux of the problem here was whether or not the artists and dealers and various other people that were deeply involved with DenFur were going to get fucked over when hypothetically speaking, if Corey Woods decided to pull out all of his cash, and, you know, like declare bankruptcy and divert those funds either to his own personal bank account or the other conventions that he's, you know, been running under Corgi Events LLC. That was the crux of the matter. And yeah, you know, whatever. As you can tell, everything that I've stated up to this point, I haven't even scratched the surface as part of like all the various people that are involved in all this. But if I did, we'd be here all day. So let's continue. What I'm about to mention right here, right now, does not pertain to the DenFur drama at its core. However, it does pertain to DenFur at large. And it was interesting to note that a couple of people had gone so far as to allege that the con staff and the people at the very top, like Corey Woods, had been exposed for being pedophiles and zoophiles, or were complacently just tolerant of those activities. And there's no proof to that, all right? There's proof that a couple of affiliates, like people in that area that might have known some of these people, are guilty of at least sexual assault, maybe like diddling kids or zoophilia, but there was no direct proof to correlate that the con staff, like at least the ones that I'm aware of, or Corey Woods, had been engaging in anything like pedophilia or zoophilia. There's no proof. It would certainly be telling if there was, but at the same time, as of recording this video, I didn't see any proof of that. So I would just like to mention that it would paint the perceptions of the furry fandom in reference to DenFur. They saw it as a hotbed of controversy, all right? In spite of the fact that this was conceptualized under the entire premise that this was not going to be like Rocky Mountain Fur Con. This is going to be a lot more tolerant, a lot more accommodating to people of all denominations, not just a few, and that people were going to be, you know, appreciated, respected, and cherished as members of the furry fandom. However, I will state that as like early as August 2021, I couldn't help but notice a few zoophile tweets from zoophiles on Twitter. They were basically trying to organize like meets at DenFur. Obviously, that doesn't look good. I don't know what DenFur did about it at the time, but like various furries stepped up to plate and spoke at great length about how this is absolutely horrible and that these people need to be watched. You even had people that were like, you know, sharing screen caps of fursuits and being like, dude, if you fucking see this fursuit, you need to stay the fuck away. They've been outed as a zoophile. They are not to be trusted. They've been doing things. They would share very intimate knowledge, as in like you know, like shared screen caps from Telegram that, you know, honestly reminded me a lot of the material that I saw during the whole Kira the Wolf debacle. So that whole place, it certainly has a negative reputation. I'm talking about DenFur as a convention. All right, usually all conventions will have a good aspect that you can like point at, and it's like what it's known for. Like for instance, Midwest Fur Fest being known for room parties, Biggest Little Fur Con being known for like the casinos, Anthrocon knowing for Pittsburgh. But like there's always an underbelly like to anything that's good. All right, anything good that you can recognize a con by, there's going to be some sort of negative underbelly. For DenFur, the good was the sense of compassion, community, and getting to hang out with your friends and have a good time. The bad is that the surrounding area seems to have an inordinate amount of pedophiles and zoophiles and sexual deviants just kind of lurking around. And, you know, it's kind of like Rainforest, if you remember that. Rainforest had the perception throughout the furry fandom as being a wild con, that you had a lot of diaper furs, a lot of people that were into some really kinky shit. Just because Rainforest is no more doesn't mean that those people just disappeared, you know? They're going to find new areas to occupy. And for the people that were attending Rocky Mountain Fur Con, DenFur seems like the best option. It's right there, local, and they can be a part of things. So, you know, it goes to show, like, the controversy is going to pervade. For instance, the controversies that surrounded Rocky Mountain Fur Con seem to have been like inherited by DenFur, you know? So, where do we go from here? Well, if Treble and the board of directors of this new nonprofit organization can be believed, then DenFur is going to proceed and operate as intended. All right, there isn't going to be too much of a disturbance apart from the sudden loss of revenue and having to refund so many dealers, artists, and individuals that were planning on attending DenFur and decided to cancel, lest they lose whatever money they contributed. You know, something for a con badge, something for a like dealer room table or an artist alley table. It really depends. I understand completely why they wanted refunds up front because, you know, something like that, like stated in passing, the suggestion, it'll tell you that furries have a strange herd mentality and like weirder shit has happened before. Remember DashCon, the failure of DashCon, how like, you know, the convention organizers promised all of these events to take place, and by the end of it, on the fucking Friday, like, of the event, they're asking people to contribute like thousands upon thousands of dollars to keep the convention running. And even after getting people to like do so, the convention was not running at full capacity. Like, as in, a lot of the events that were promised, a lot of the hosts, guests, and various other people that were supposed to attend never showed up. And the people that attended, it was a failure of a convention, and the mystery that recurs on everyone's mind is, where did all the money go? Because it was a lot more than just the money that people contributed on Friday night. It was also anything contributed to charity or things of that nature that were outside of the realm of like the purviews of the finances of the convention organizers. Could have gone in somebody's pocket. Who knows? But like, people are going to err on the side of caution in things like this. And all it takes is one whistleblower to like reveal the nefarious plans of somebody at the top, and Treble seemed like a convenient fall guy. Now, was this supposed to sabotage DenFur, or was this just merely a fuck you before they left? I don't know. I don't know the identity of the person that wrote the initial email. What they started was a whole shitstorm of drama that I bore witness to at the very beginning, and it was shocking to me. See, conventions are great, alright? I love conventions. I love furry conventions. I love anime conventions. I love the chance to meet new people along the way in person and to rejoice in being able to celebrate and enjoy something that we both enjoy. That's what I can do with furries at furry conventions. Until VR chat kind of took over, and now I can get the FurryCon experience every day, anytime I want. So, do I really need to attend a furry convention? Maybe one of these days I need to go, but yeah, a lot of people were nervous when they saw that first email, and they were just worried that they were never going to get their money and that DenFur was just going to cease to exist. And there was a unilateral sense of loss, that DenFur was almost a symbol for people to rejoice, to get together, and to unite against bad actors and, you know, political bullshit perpetuated by people like the Furry Raiders. And for it to collapse in such a way, at least in their mind, that was, like, absolutely tragic. I feel like the furry fandom, you know, collectively, everybody that was a part of the whole DenFur drama, overreacted just a little bit, but I can certainly sympathize with their sense of caution in light of all this, because, you know, the furry fandom, love it or hate it, there are various bad actors here that can and will take advantage of you, me, and anybody else they have the opportunity to do so. So, I do not fault any artists or like any dealers that decide to pull their money out. It does fuck the convention up a little bit, because now that sudden loss of revenue that has been like, you know, refunded might impact their ability to continue to function as need be. But the perception that a lot of people have is that DenFur already has the money. And if it's not DenFur that has the money, then it's other conventions that fall under that umbrella of Corgi Events LLC. That money should be able to be there, like, you know, provided through Eventbrite or what other venues that they use for registration, and be able to sustain operations. But, you know, Corey Woods, aka Treble, like, this whole thing has shown it's shown a couple of different sides of him, and not in a good light. It's shown a lot of incompetence. It's shown a lot of not taking the situation as seriously as need be until it was glaring him right in the face. It shows hints and indication of prior bad actions, like not paying your employees or not paying for things that you promised you would. Whether or not the people could be believed, I don't know, but again, this is not a story of heroes and villains. This is really a shit show, and everybody decided to step up to first plate to, you know, give their first pitch, like whatever interactions they had up to this point. And, you know, the one thing that I will say in Corey Wood's defense, they were not spared. Like, they were put on full blast, up front and center. Like, everybody was shitting on them, left, right, and center. They couldn't catch a break. Whether or not they deserve a break, that's for you to decide, but it could entirely be possible that this is not a story of, like, Corey Woods, aka Treble, being completely at fault for everything. This could be a story of everybody is at fault for one thing or another, and that, like, it was convenient to point at the guy at the top and say, you're at fault for all this. It could also be, like, you know, chalked up to various things that initially started as minor, like, things that built up over time. One of the most egregious things I read is that, like, as far as the relationship that DenFur had with its home hotel, is that the home hotel had a change in management, and when they had the change in management, they wanted the money up front, something that previously was alluded to as, hey, like, pay a modicum of this up front and pay the rest later. That was purviews under, like, the agreement that Corey Woods had with the event space. What this new management wanted is, like, there were hints that they were kind of anti-furry, or they didn't believe that, like, the furry fandom would muster that kind of cash to pay for the event. But supposedly somebody, like, when negotiations for, like, the event were going to take place, and the hotel was saying, hey, you cannot operate this event until you pay us the whole complete balance of, like, $45,000. Somebody contributed $25,000, their own personal life savings, to ensure that DenFur was going to happen. And with an IOU from Corey Woods. Whether or not this individual was ever paid, I can't really say. Hopefully they were. But, you know, with that whole, like, 3 tax liens, one for $7,000 to $8,000, one for $20,000, one for $87,000. Like, this should show a recurrent history that Corey Woods is pretty shitty at, like, managing money, alright? If the fucking government is keeping records and keeping track of everything and assessing a lien for unpaid taxes, well, that would show me that there's a hell of a lot more money. Like, you know, your taxes are a fraction of what you, like, earn, alright? So, if the tax lien's for that amount of money, like, what was the gross amount? What was this a combination of? What was this a culmination of? Like, I did take, like, a couple credits courses and, like, taxes and shit like that, but, you know, unless I get to look at some, like, real financials here, I noticed that the amounts for the liens, like, the original amount, was largely forgiven. Like, it was usually cut in half, you know, like, you know, you were guilty of, like, this amount of money, but we're going to only charge you, like, half of that. So, like, $20,000 instead of $40,000, or, like, you know, $7,000 instead of $16,000. It depends. Anyway, I've had just about enough of talking about all this. Not because I don't enjoy talking about it, but, like, there was just so much material here that is just coming out, bursting out of the seams. DenFur will probably be taking place this year, and all of this drama was entirely unnecessary in one regard, as in the stress that it caused dealers, the stress that it caused the artists. But at the same time, it's good to bear in mind that this was all indicative of bad behavior perpetuated by Corey Wood, aka Treble, but also like various other people that were in close association with them. And finally, the chickens came home to roost, and they decided that they were going to call out Treble for, like, you know, all of the chaos, dysfunction, and dysphoria surrounding DenFur. But so it goes. DenFur will probably be taking place, so if you're intending on going to DenFur, good for you. I hope you have a good time. But for the rest of us that couldn't help but notice that there was something going on here and maybe pulled out our money and decided to skip this year, yeah, I can't blame you for that. I can't fault you for that. A lot of the individuals that were a part of this story were sus as fuck. But, you know, you can't really let that get in the way of enjoying a good time with your family and friends. Well, more accurately, your friends, unless your family goes with you to furry conventions, in which case, if that's the case, you're fucking weird. Your family's fucking weird. Don't associate with me. Nah, just kidding. But yeah, like, if I got anything inaccurate, if you think that, like, my retelling of everything that I learned from tweets, materials that I had access to, and my research is completely fallacious, go ahead and reach out to me. Leave a comment in the comment section. I'm very interested to hear, like, your perspective on everything that sort of unfolded. But, like, as an outsider looking in and recognizing certain people that I know, and just, like, piecing together, you know, the series of events that led us up to this point and various other things to sort of reflect and bear in mind, I think I had it pretty accurate for the most part, at least over the course of last week to this week. If something changed last minute as I'm sort of uploading this video, then that's certainly a new development. If I have to, I'll make a follow-up to this video to sort of like clarify anything that I left ambiguous or wasn't sufficiently explained. But yeah, I think I've had just about enough time. I just had about enough, like, talking about all this, alright? This was fucking hard to follow, even for me, and this was hard to fucking retell and adapt in my own way, shooting from the hip, like, regurgitating everything that I studied up to this point. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope this clears some things up for some of you out there in the audience that was curious about what I was referring to and what people on Twitter were talking about. But, yeah, all I can really say is, hope you guys have have a great rest of your day. Till next time, guys, take care and peace. I hope you all have a better one. Hey fellas, thanks for watching the video today. I really hope you all enjoyed it. Would you care to hit that like button and subscribe for more? You know I'd really appreciate that, right? And hey, if you're in the mood for gaming, why don't you check me out on Twitch sometime? Link in the description below. Till next time, guys, take care and peace. I hope you all have a better one.